I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there.
She stood beside the king through scandal, exile, and a crown the world never wanted to give her. But one secret letter has changed everything. The palace is scrambling, the king is silent, and the people who never wanted her there are finally getting the moment they have been waiting for. Camilla Parker Bowles may have just signed her own political death warrant. What exactly was inside that letter? Let's find out. The letter that shook the palace.
It was a historic day in New York. Crowds gathered outside one of the city's most beloved landmarks, the New York Public Library.
Turned to Camilla for a comforting shoulder, and they rekindled a spark from many years ago. However,
secrets inside Buckingham Palace never stay secret for long. The walls are too thin, the staff too many, and the stakes too high for anything truly explosive to stay buried. Someone always talks. Someone always slips. And when they do, the fallout is never quiet. What happened in the closing days of April 2025 was exactly that kind of moment. A letter, written in private by Queen Camilla herself, found its way to a senior member of Parliament, and the moment the wrong people inside the palace found out it existed, everything. Now, before you imagine some dramatic spy movie scene with briefcases and secret handshakes, let us be very clear about what this actually was. It was a letter, a real, written, formal piece of correspondence. And that is precisely what made it so dangerous. To truly understand why one letter could cause this level of chaos inside one of the most powerful institutions in the world, you have to first understand the rules that govern royal communication. Members of the royal family, particularly those at the very top of the hierarchy, do not simply write to politicians on matters of policy or palace business whenever the mood strikes them. The rules against this are not just traditional courtesies that can be brushed aside when inconvenient. They are constitutional guardrails. They exist because the survival of the British monarchy has always depended on one foundational principle above everything else. The crown must remain politically neutral. The moment a member of the royal family begins lobbying, pressuring, or directing political figures toward particular outcomes, the institution is destabilized. And a political actor can be challenged, criticized, voted against, and ultimately dismantled in ways that a neutral institution cannot. Camilla, according to every source briefed on the situation, crossed that line, not accidentally, clearly and deliberately. What happened next was almost like something out of a thriller. A senior palace advisor attended what was scheduled as a completely routine liaison meeting with a government official. Nothing on the agenda gave a sign that anything unusual was coming. The meeting was the kind that generates no headlines and produces no outcomes worth remembering. But at some point during that meeting, the government official referenced the letter, casually, the way you mention something when you genuinely assume the other person already knows about it. The palace advisor did not know about it. The advisor had never heard of the letter's existence. The meeting ended shortly after that reference was made, far more quickly than it had been scheduled to run. And the moment the advisor was out of that room, the phone calls began. Within 24 hours, the matter had escalated beyond the advisor's level entirely. Within 48 hours, it had reached the desk of the king's most senior private secretary, one of the most powerful non-royal figures inside the entire royal household. Emergency consultations were held. Senior figures who had spent their careers managing sensitive royal situations were pulled into the discussion. The letter was assessed, its implications were analyzed, and at the end of that process, a decision was reached that nobody in that room would have predicted even a month earlier. Queen Camilla would not be attending the upcoming royal funeral. No press release would be issued. No reason would be given. She would simply not be there. The timing made everything worse. The royal household had been operating under pressure for months already. Questions about the king's health had never fully disappeared from the media's attention. Tensions around the roles and visibility of various senior royals had been simmering. The institution was managing more than it wanted to manage. And now, arriving not from an external enemy or a tabloid investigation, but from the queen consort herself, came a crisis that had the potential to destabilize everything the palace had been carefully holding together. The advisor who first heard about the letter in that routine government meeting could not have known, walking into that room, that they were about to trigger the most serious internal royal crisis in years. But that is exactly what happened. What was in the letter? and why it was dangerous.
Sworn this day.
And thousands of book donations. The Queen says that the joy of reading has long been part of her DNA. And your father...
The question that has been rolling through palace corridors and Westminster offices ever since this story broke is a straightforward one. What exactly did she write? What was in that letter that was serious enough to get a queen consort banned from a royal funeral? The full contents have not been officially confirmed by any source willing to attach their name to a public statement. But what has transpired through people closely connected to the situation is detailed enough to explain the harshness of the response, and troubling enough that even Camilla's most committed defenders inside the palace have struggled to mount a credible argument in her favor. To understand the letter's contents, you first need to understand the concept of royal precedence, because that is what sits at the heart of this entire situation. Precedence is the formal system that determines the official ranking and positioning of members of the royal family at state occasions, ceremonies, and formal events. It dictates who walks in front of whom at a procession, who is seated where at an official dinner, and whose name appears in which order on formal documentation. To the outside world, this sounds like the kind of administrative detail that only the most dedicated royal enthusiasts would find interesting. Inside the palace, precedence is nothing less than a daily, visible expression of power. It tells everyone in the room, without a single word being spoken, exactly where you stand, how much you matter, how much influence do you hold. Changes to precedence are not administrative adjustments, they are political statements. Camilla had become aware, through conversations and observations over several months, that adjustments were being discussed that would affect her position relative to other senior members of the family. She had not been formally consulted on these discussions in the way she felt her position warranted. She had raised concerns through internal channels, and felt, rightly or wrongly, that those concerns were not being taken seriously. And so she made a decision that bypassed the internal channels entirely and went directly to a political figure with enough influence to shift the conversation in her favor. The parliamentarian she chose was not a random selection. This was someone with specific knowledge of and interest in matters touching on the monarchy, someone whose opinion carried genuine weight in circles where decisions about royal protocol intersect with government policy. In the letter, Camilla reportedly made a detailed and specific case. She outlined the changes she believed were being made to her precedents. She named the individuals she held responsible for those changes. She referenced private conversations that had taken place within the palace walls, conversations she should not have been bringing into the political sphere under any circumstances. And she made detailed connections between what was happening to her status within the institution and decisions being made at the governmental level, suggesting that political intervention was not only warranted, but necessary. The constitutional violation in all of that is not subtle. A queen consort lobbying a parliamentarian to intervene in internal royal affairs on her behalf is, by any reading of established convention, completely outside the boundaries of her role. The monarchy is supposed to resolve its internal matters internally. It is supposed to present a cooperative identity to the political world, not invite politicians into its family disputes. And by writing that letter, Camilla did not just violate a courtesy. She let a sitting parliamentarian into the private life of the royal household, giving them access and information they were never meant to have, and possibly an advantage they could use later. It was not a mistake in the ordinary sense of the word. It was a choice, and choices of that kind, inside an institution as protocol-bound as the British monarchy, carry consequences that cannot simply be apologized away. The funeral that became a battlefield.
Tour and our very own resident bookworm, Jenna. They capped off the day with a glitzy cultural event
today at the New York Public Library, one of the world's greatest libraries.
The royal funeral at the heart of this story was never meant to be a big public event. It was supposed to be quiet and private for the family and the people who truly knew the person who had died. Normally, it would have been handled calmly and respectfully, the way the palace does best when everything is working as it should. It would have come and gone without generating a single difficult headline. But by the time the date of the ceremony arrived, nothing inside the palace was functioning as it should. And so, what should have been a quiet family gathering became instead the most publicly visible symbol of a crisis that the institution was desperately trying to keep contained. The absence of Queen Camilla from the ceremony was noticed before the event was even over. Royal correspondents who cover these occasions professionally, people with years of experience reading the visual language of royal appearances, identified the gap immediately. They knew who was supposed to be there. They knew the protocols that govern attendance at events of this kind. And they knew that her absence, unexplained and unannounced, was not the result of a diary clash or a minor health inconvenience. Here is something worth understanding about royal funerals. They are never just funerals. Every face that shows up matters. Every face that does not show up matters even more. The seating arrangements, the order of the procession, who stands next to whom, who rides in which car, all of it is loaded with meaning that the people inside the institution read like a language. So when a senior royal is absent from a ceremony they were expected to attend and no explanation is offered, the silence does not feel like nothing. It feels like a verdict. But the conditions were not ordinary, and so a ceremony that should have been forgotten within 48 hours became instead the most publicly visible evidence of a crisis the palace was desperately trying to hide. The journalists who cover the royal family for a living noticed Camilla's absence almost immediately. These are people who have spent years, sometimes entire careers, learning to read this family. They know who attends what. They know what her presence at an event of this kind would normally look like. And they knew, from the moment they scanned the room and came up empty, that this was not a scheduling issue or a minor illness. Something had happened. The questions came fast. The palace answered none of them. Total silence, wall to wall. And anyone who has watched this institution for any length of time knows that total silence is nothing. It is a choice, and it usually means the truth is worse than whatever the press is currently imagining. What most people watching from outside did not know was how the decision to exclude her had actually been made. This was not a junior official being overly cautious. This was not a miscommunication between palace departments. This decision moved through the highest levels of the royal household before it landed anywhere near Camilla. The king's most senior private secretary was involved. Advisors with decades of experience managing the most sensitive royal situations were consulted. The full weight of the institution's internal machinery was applied to the question of what to do about her. And what the institution decided, after all of that deliberation, was that she could not be there. Now this is the part that really stings. Camilla was not told by Charles. Her own husband did not sit down with her and explain what was happening and why. She found out through an intermediary. Someone was sent to deliver the message on Charles's behalf. And the message, however carefully it was worded, was not gentle. She was told her attendance would not be appropriate given the current situation. She was told the palace believed her absence was in everyone's interest. Carefully chosen words, professional language, and underneath all of it, a reality that no amount of careful wording could soften. She was being kept away from a royal family event that, by every measure of her title and her standing, she had every right to attend. That had never happened to her before. Not once, not at this level. The mood inside the palace in the days around the funeral was something that multiple sources have described as twisted. That is the word that keeps coming up. Not loud, not dramatic. Just this thick, pressurized quiet that filled every room, where staff were watching what they said. Everyone was waiting for something to break, without knowing exactly what that something was going to be. The press was circling, the palace was holding, and the gap between those two realities was getting smaller by the day. Charles caught in the middle.
In history that NATO invoked Article 5 of collective defense, he underscored how that response united the two.
Boy, man, attacked me, and I did fight back. And
To understand what King Charles is going through right now, forget the crown for a moment. Forget the titles and the palaces and the centuries of institutional weight that come with being King of England. Just think about the man, a man who spent more than 30 years of his life being publicly shamed for loving the wrong woman. 30 years of newspaper front pages calling him a villain. 30 years of being compared to Diana and losing that comparison in the court of public opinion every single time. 30 years of watching Camilla absorb hatred that would have broken most people, while she stood quietly beside him and waited for the world to come around. He did not walk away from her during those 30 years. He could have. It would have been easier for everyone, including him, if he had, but he stayed. And when he finally became king and the crown was on his head and nobody could take it from him, one of the first things he did was make absolutely sure that Camilla's place beside him was not a courtesy. It was not a compromise. He gave her the title of Queen Consort when convention, and the advice of practically every senior figure around him suggested he should offer something smaller and safer. He pushed for that title because he believed, with everything in him, that she had earned it, that after everything she had endured, she deserved to walk into any room in the world with her head up. And now here he is, sitting in Buckingham Palace, while his wife goes through the worst crisis of her royal life. And the most painful part of it is this: he cannot simply fix it. Not this time. Because the letter she wrote did not give him a problem that a show of loyal solidarity could solve. It gave him the opposite kind of problem, the kind where standing up for her publicly would itself make things worse. Think about it from where he is sitting. If the king is seen to protect his wife from the consequences of a clear breach of constitutional rules, what does he say to every other member of the royal family about those rules? He tells them that the rules are real, right up until the moment they apply to someone he loves personally. He tells them that the institution bends for sentiment. And an institution that bends for sentiment stops being an institution. It becomes a family business run on favoritism. Charles has spent his entire preparation for kingship trying to prevent exactly that. He cannot undo it now just because the person in the wrong happens to be his wife. So he is stuck between the husband he has always been and the king he has always promised he would be. And there is no clean way through. Every option available to him costs him something real. The people around him describe a man who is keeping himself composed in public with a discipline that has clearly cost him something in private. His schedule continues. His engagements happen. His public face does not crack. But the people who know him well say there is a weight to him right now that he is not fully hiding. And the surprising thing is that it does not read as anger. It reads as sadness. The particular kind of sadness that comes from watching something you worked very hard to build start to come apart, and knowing that your hands are partially tied when it comes to stopping it. Between Charles and Camilla themselves, things are different right now in ways that the people closest to them have clearly noticed. The ease that has always determined how they are together, Junior, has been replaced by something more careful, more formal, like two people who are both very aware that what they say to each other right now matters in ways that go beyond the ordinary. Whether that is a temporary response to a situation that neither of them has ever faced before, or whether it signals something deeper shifting between them, is something that even their inner circle is not willing to guess at out loud. But the change is real, and in a relationship as long and as hard-won as theirs, real changes do not pass unnoticed. The royals who want her gone.
All of the mood music coming from the palace on this and from the British Embassy is very much that they want the American people to understand.
Let us talk about something the palace has been very careful for a very long time to pretend is not true. Not everyone inside the royal family wanted Camilla there. Not when Charles first started pushing for her formal recognition. Not when he made her queen consort. Not now. There is a group of people within and around the palace who have never made their peace with her presence at the center of the institution. These are people with real jobs, access, and influence over how the crown operates every single day. And right now, they have something they have never had before. A reason to act that has nothing to do with how they feel, and everything to do with what she did. You have to go back to the summer of 1997 to understand where this comes from. When Diana died, the grief was not only public, it was personal, and it was deep, inside the walls of the institution itself. The people who had worked for her, who had built their professional identities around her, who had believed in what she stood for and what she brought to the family, did not simply move on when the years passed and Charles married Camilla. Some of them left the household, but a significant number stayed, and they carried everything they felt with them, quietly and professionally, without making a scene, but they carried it. What those people adapted to was not what they accepted. There is a difference. They changed their external behavior because their jobs required it. They showed up at the events. They fulfilled their duties. They said the right things in the right rooms at the right moments. But underneath that professional surface, the loyalty was still to Diana, to her memory, to the version of the royal family she represented. And it never really transferred to the new order, no matter how many years went by or how formally that new order was established. William is the person at the center of this who carries the most weight, and he has always been extraordinarily careful about how he handles it. He has never said anything publicly that could be read as an attack on Camilla. He has never given an interview that crossed that line. He has shown up to the events where their presence overlaps and conducted himself with the kind of controlled, surface-level warmth that royal life has a very specific vocabulary for. But the people who have watched him most carefully over the longest period of time consistently say the same thing. There is a point at which his acceptance of her stops. It does not go all the way. It never has. And the ceiling on that acceptance has always been lower than the public image of a united family suggests. Since the letter story broke, sources indicate that conversations happening around William have taken on a new quality. His senior advisors have been in more intensive discussions than usual about the longer-term shape of the institution. The questions being asked in those conversations touch directly on matters of influence and precedence and decision-making authority within the palace. None of this is happening publicly. None of it is leaking through pointed statements or anonymous briefings to journalists. It is happening the way real power always moves inside the royal household. Quietly, patiently, in rooms where the cameras do not go. But it is happening. And Camilla, who has survived as long as she has precisely because she understands how palace power actually works, knows that. Then there are the officials and courtiers who operate even further from public view. The people who decide which briefing lands on whose desk, who gets included in which planning meeting and who does not, whose name appears on which invitation list, and whose gets quietly removed. These are not glamorous decisions, they are administrative ones, but they add up. Over days and weeks and months, they shape the lived experience of what it actually means to occupy a particular position inside the royal household. These people have always had the power to make Camilla's daily existence within the institution easier or harder. What the letter has changed is this. They no longer need sentiment or personal loyalty to justify making it harder. They have an institutional reason, a principled one. And principled reasons, inside a place as obsessed with protocol and propriety as Buckingham Palace, open doors that feelings alone never could. Can Camilla survive this? So can she come back from this? That is the real question underneath everything else. Underneath the palace politics and the constitutional analysis and the careful statements that nobody is actually making publicly. Can Camilla survive a crisis that came entirely from her own hand, that gave her opponents exactly what they needed, and that put her husband in the one position he most wanted to avoid? Can she recover from this? Her allies inside the palace will tell you yes, and they make a reasonable case. Look at what has not happened, they say. She still holds her title. Nobody has issued a formal statement stripping her of anything. Her staff is still in place. Her residences are still hers. The palace has not publicly confirmed the details of the letter or what it contained. The funeral exclusion was real, and it was painful, and it sent a message that nobody misread, but it was one event, one signal, not a permanent restructuring of her role. The door, her supporters insist, is still open. The palace is being corrected, not dismantled. And they point to the fact that the institution has absorbed things far more dramatic than this, and eventually found a way to move forward. That argument is not wrong exactly, but it is incomplete. Because the thing that the letter did, beyond the immediate political damage and the humiliation of the funeral ban, is much harder to measure and much harder to reverse. It changed the conversation about her, inside the palace, in a way that a title and a set of apartments cannot fix. Before the letter, the people who opposed her position within the institution were working from a place of sentiment. Their objection to Camilla was rooted in history, in Diana, in old loyalty and old pain and old arguments that the palace could always, with some justification, categorize as belonging to the past. They were feelings, strong ones, but feelings. The letter turned a feeling into a fact. It gave her opponents something concrete and current, and constitutionally serious to point to. It moved the argument against her from the territory of emotion into the territory of principle, and that is an entirely different battlefield. On a battlefield of principle, you cannot win by waiting for people to get over themselves. You cannot win by being patient and dignified until the memory fades. You have to actually address the substance of the charge, and the substance of the charge is this. A queen consort used political channels to fight an internal palace battle. That is not something you talk your way around with a good public appearance and a few months of keeping a low profile. What happens next depends on a small number of people making decisions that will define the next chapter of her life inside the institution. It depends on Charles more than anyone else, not on whether he loves her. That has never been in serious doubt, but on whether he is willing to be visibly, warmly, publicly in her corner during the months ahead, when doing so has a real institutional cost. Whether he has the will to stand beside her in a way that goes beyond private loyalty and becomes a public statement, or whether the king in him wins that particular argument and the warmth stays private while the distance between them becomes the story that the world sees. It depends on William, on what he decides to do with the space that this crisis has created. He has more options available to him now than he had 6 months ago. He can use them to consolidate against her, or he can choose not to. That choice, whichever way it goes, will shape the palace that Camilla inhabits for years to come. And it depends on Camilla herself, which brings us back to the thing that has always made her impossible to predict. She does not fold. She has been in situations before where the smart money was against her, and she found a way through anyway, by being patient in a way that most people simply cannot sustain. By understanding that institutions move slowly, and that slow-moving institutions can be outlasted by people who are willing to wait. Whether this is one more storm she can outlast, or whether it is the one that finally runs out her clock, nobody inside Buckingham Palace is currently in a position to say with any confidence. What they will say is this: the palace she is navigating today is genuinely different from the one she was navigating before that letter was written. The people who were already against her now have ammunition they did not have before. The people who were for her have to weigh the cost of that support in a way they did not previously have to. And the ground under her feet, which was never as solid as it looked, feels noticeably less stable than it did even a few months ago. She has beaten longer odds, but she has never been quite here before. Camilla fought for decades just to be accepted. She endured hatred, grief, and public humiliation to earn a crown the world never wanted to give her. But one letter, written in frustration and discovered by accident, has placed everything she built at serious risk. The palace is watching, Charles is calculating, William is waiting. And Camilla, for the first time in a very long time, is not in control of how this ends.